Gentlemen, this is Insight on Business. My name is Michael Libby. This is being powered by our advertising agency, Insight Advertising, Marketing, and Communications, and brought to you by our fine friends over at Fuirsa. Business and tax professionals, ladies and gentlemen, that'll work hard for you until the cows come home. That's Fuirsa, F-U-I-R-S-A. You can find them at Fuirsa.com here in the metro of Des Moines. Earned media. You know, it's one of those holy grails that so many people want to be able to have. If you've got a business or service, how much is it worth to go ahead and have your business and or service featured in a news story by the reporters in the newspaper or perhaps on television or radio? Now, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we said that the worst job in America, according to several surveys, was that of a newspaper reporter. But we don't care about that so much. It's their problem that they're in that business. Our issue is trying to get those beleaguered newspaper reporters to carry our story. Well, just a couple of weeks ago, I was part of an adventure over at the Blank Park Zoo, and it was being promoted as a media day for all kinds of profits and nonprofits coming together. It was put on by the Greater Des Moines Partnership. And the media panel, let me make sure I get everybody's name correctly there. The media panel was Lynn Hicks. He's the business writer for the Des Moines Register. Also Lynn Melling, who is a reporter for WHO TV. Patrick Bell from KCCI and Scott Allen from the Des Moines Radio Group. They were sitting in a panel talking about how your business and or nonprofit can get some earned media. Now, the good news and the bad news happens to be that the good news is if you're a well-known business or if you're a well-known nonprofit, congratulations. You've already got a leg up on everybody else because they're looking for stories and you already come with credibility. If you already don't have a relationship with reporters, that's when it gets difficult. And it gets difficult for cities and counties. If you're trying to spread the good news about your product and or service, it's much more difficult to get that earned media. So let's see, there's two very clear items that came out of the media panel. Number one, if your company is well known, you got a leg up. Number two, if you have a good relationship with a reporter, you're in. All right? I can't tell you how many times Lynn and Patrick and Lynn or Scott mentioned the fact that they knew somebody in the audience. Well, that person's from the American Heart Association, that person's from Iowa Health, that person is, and it went on. And they had already had a clear relationship with several of these individuals who were concerned with the public relations of their business. If you don't have a relationship with the news reporter, that makes getting press a lot more difficult. So how do you get relationships with the news reporters? Believe me, they are all human. We are all human. Trust me, we are always looking for stories. Now, back in the day when I did television and radio, it wasn't me, the reporter, that was anxious to go out there and dig up stories. I mean, that wasn't my job. That was usually the news director. But times have changed. Now the news director is more worried about compliance and positioning and those types of things. And the reporters are out there trying to scour up their news stories. So what do? Start to build relationships with the reporters and then start to field them all kinds of issues, but make it interesting. Make sure that the event is something worth covering. Make sure that the conversation happens to be something that would interest more than just your product and or service or your customers or the people that live in your community. Broaden that perspective so that you're sharing information that would be utilized by a wider group of people. It really is important. But the first trick is to make sure that you start to cultivate relationships with the media. And that's easy. You don't always ask them for a favor. You don't always say, hey, by the way, bang, you shoot them a note on Twitter or email or a telephone call and say, hey, did you know that XYZ is going on? Hey, do you know? It happens all the time, and for those of us who have been in the media, is still in the media, we're looking for stories all the time. So if you are a trusted source, we're more likely to be able to play into what it is that you want to have talked about. How do they prefer to get your messages? Well, interestingly enough, mostly by email or by text. Sometimes I think that's because they can ignore those more readily. Very often, the using the telephone isn't in their vocabulary. So you just keep on banging away and be helpful and friendly, and who knows, one of these days Patrick Bell from KCCI will show up on your doorstep and say, hey, here we are, and we're doing a story about you. By the way, I do have an announcement about that. Media and media relations. Lynn Hicks from the Des Moines Register will be our guest coming up in June. They're moving, I think, on the 17th to their new offices outside of Locust Street, so we had to push them back a week. And so it looks like we're going to have Lynn Hicks from the Des Moines Register in talking about this very thing, how to get media coverage. We'll also talk about the newspaper industry and business. When we come back, kids, we're going to be joined by two individuals, Rick and Mary, and we're going to be talking about the Avenue of the Saints Amphitheater. This is a huge project, and when I first learned about it over a year ago, I was a little bit doubtful that this was going to come together, but it is coming together, mostly because some very, very determined people on the back side of this story. It's called Avenue of the Saints Amphitheater. It's going to be south of Des Moines. We'll cover that when we come back, and a little bit later, at the close of the show, the sexiest ad we've ever seen on television. You got to see this. Hang around for that. Rick and Mary coming up next with Insight on Business, the News Hour. My name is Michael Libby. We'll be back right after this.